Is there a link between OCD and alcoholism? In this video, I'm going to break it down for you and give you a couple examples of my experiences with this and see if you guys can resonate to it. So if you're new to the channel, welcome. My name's Josh, living life alcohol free. If you are returning, thank you guys so much for being here and subscribing and coming along with me on this journey. I appreciate every single one of you. So OCD it's a tough thing. You know, I still struggle with it. I struggled with it all my life as a drinker and even before that. And I think a lot of us turn to alcohol because of our obsessive ways. We have these compulsions and we reach for things to find solace. And then we start using these things and then we find ourselves obsessing over it and using it as a crutch, as a tool to help us kind of cope with anxiety, cope with life, cope with the stresses. And a lot of us drink to quiet the stress. Let's face it, it seems to help, especially in the moment when we're drinking. You know, we're able to let our guard down. We can kind of feel relaxed, and we get to a situation where we rely on that feeling to get us through. The problem is we start reaching for alcohol more and more, and then we get to a point where it disrupts our daily life, and then we have to deal with the hangover after that, you know, the next day. So that's kind of what I want to get into, and really touch base with you guys on where you're at with it and what your struggles might be. I still struggle with it. My particular crutch lately, I've noticed, is Facebook. I get on there and I start scrolling, and I actively have to pay attention to how much time I'm spending on it, what I'm looking at. And this year I picked up reading as a way to kind of put my device down and focus on something else. So I started reading novels. I started picking up books and just reading instead of scrolling all the time. Now that doesn't mean that I still don't have, you know, that issue, but I'm getting better at it, I should say, and that really does help to have a plan and an idea of what you can use instead of these things. Is there a cure for OCD? I would say no, and I'll get into that in a little bit. But one of the examples I was going to talk about was, if you have kids, if you are married, if you have um, you know, a house full of people, you can kind of notice even adults struggle with this. We struggle, and we need to be reminded, whether it's from someone else or from ourselves, that what we're doing is not healthy, it's not helping, and it's making things worse. And I guess I'll use the example of when I quit drinking and the months after that, and even into the first year or two, I struggled because we still had alcohol in the house. And I had beer in my fridge for the first like 4 months after I quit, and I was not really tempted to drink it. Now, it wasn't like my favorite beer in the world, and I think that that probably helped, but it was the beer that I drank normally. So I think I drank it to the point where when I would think about it, I would kind of feel nauseated, like it didn't seem like something that I wanted to reach for anymore. So I did end up having my favorite beer in there over the summer, like 2 or 3 months after I quit, and that was kind of triggering because I bought it for a graduation party for one of our kids. We were having people over, and I wanted to, you know, have things on hand, drinks on hand for people. And that beer was in there for a good couple weeks, and I had a couple big urges to drink around like 60 days. And I kind of noticed that having that beer in there was giving me this compulsion to think about alcohol and kind of glorify it and make it seem like if I turned to it, I would feel better. And each time I had that urge to drink, I would play the tape forward. I would play that drinking session forward, and I would get to a point where I'm like, you know, I won't feel good. I'll be saying stuff that's stupid. I'll be forgetting things. and then I'll pass out and wake up in the morning with a hangover and be in that same cycle again. And I don't want that. So I ultimately ended up dumping out all the beer that I had in my fridge around the 4 month mark, and it was freeing. I thought I was going to be at a stage where I was angry with alcohol because the sobriety group that I was on, it really kind of made a lot of people made alcohol out to be this demon. And yeah, it is a demon. It can be, uh, but at the same time, I didn't want to demonize alcohol because my wife still drank, my friends still drank, people in my life still would drink, but they didn't necessarily have a problem like I did. So I felt like I was kind of doing myself a disservice by thinking about alcohol that way. That doesn't mean that I still didn't really think negatively of drinking, but I made the conscious decision to think of it as a negative thing for me because I couldn't really control my obsession with it. So I really just think that if we can notice that our obsessions are quieted by alcohol, but then we turn to alcohol to quiet those other obsessions, we end up stuck in addiction and obsessed with alcohol. And it doesn't make a lot of sense to do that. And I feel like a lot of people warned us about that, like in high school with health class. Maybe you had other adult influences in your life that kind of told you that alcohol can be addicting, and tried to give you the warning signs, the warnings, and the heads up that if you drink, you have the potential of becoming addicted to alcohol, especially if you have a parent that has a problem with alcohol, and especially even more if you have both parents that are addicted to alcohol. That really kind of solidifies that it could happen to you if you use alcohol. And we throw caution to the wind. We're like, whatever, we're young, we can do it, and that's never going to happen to me. And whatever, it doesn't matter. And then I fast forward, 27 years from the ages of 15 to 42 when I was drinking, binge drinking. And man, it's like I got to a point where it was like, yeah, I mean, that's where I'm at. This was no longer a habit. This was no longer entertainment. This was my drinking was no longer fun like that anymore. I didn't really even enjoy sitting there drunk anymore. And when I was sitting there 10 beers in thinking, is this all there is? That's kind of when I knew that, something had to change, and something was changing in my mind. I wasn't glorifying alcohol anymore. I was calling it for what it was, which was a detriment. It was a detriment to my life. It was not helping anymore, and it was like the scab of drinking, and drinking and putting the band-aid on those scabs was no longer working, and it wasn't covering up my problems anymore. It was making everything worse. It was making my ruminations worse. It was making my resentments worse, and it was making me feel bad about myself. And ultimately, it was a hindrance to my relationships because I was holding everything against other people, blaming them for all of the things that were going on in my life. And it's just an obsessive thought. It's OCD, and it's obsessive, it's compulsive, and it definitely is a disorder. Whether or not there's a cure for that, I mean, I would think that some people think that there probably is. For me, I was able to get on Zoloft, and that helped me kind of quiet the voices, quiet the anxiety, quiet the angry voice that I had within. We all have this voice within us, and I think it's there to protect us. But at the same time, it does us a huge disservice. It's like the devil on one side and the angel on the other. And and we always kind of reach for that devil, we get persuaded and we say it's going to help. We think it's going to help, and then we make that choice, and then we realize, you know what, it's not helping. And once we can acknowledge that, then we can kind of move on from our life, but our drinking life. But the other example I was going to use was months later, maybe 6 months to a year, I started to recognize that my wife was drinking glasses of wine in our room. And we would just be kind of sitting at night watching a show or whatever, and I would notice her drinking her glass of wine. And I could kind of smell it, but not, only on occasion. I could certainly see it in there. And I had to say, I don't feel really that comfortable with wine being in our room. I don't mind it so much in our house if we have people over, or if she's drinking wine in the kitchen or in the living room or whatever. But for some reason, it's just when I go to my room to relax and unwind, I don't really want to see alcohol, or smell it. So I had to say something. And I noticed it happened again, and I had to say something again a few weeks later, and then maybe a couple months passed by, and I noticed it again. And I after several times of saying something to her, she said something interesting to me, which was, sometimes we have to be reminded, like we have to remind kids all the time about doing their chores, about not forgetting about, their homework, taking care of themselves in whatever way. Um, And just like kids, we as adults, we need to be reminded as well. And it was a good point. It was like, I respect that. I could say, I can understand that. So it helped me be a little bit less frustrated when I would see that. Like, well, she forgot, or she doesn't care. Those were the two thoughts that entered my mind when I would see her drinking the wine in our room. And that obsessive compulsive thought, can lead to resentment. So I certainly didn't want to just come right out and say something every single time, like, again, you know and be like that. But at the same time, I'm like, I have to speak up because this is affecting my recovery. Like, I don't feel like, it didn't trigger me to want to drink, but it triggered other thoughts like anxiety, like I said, resentments, and these kinds of things. So I would try to, you know, calm down, and then try to approach it in a respectful way, a way that, wasn't going to cause a big fight. And typically I would do that. And but I did get to a point where I would like post on my sobriety group, like, well, she's drinking in our room again, and I'm tired of saying something, but like at the same time, I have to speak up. So after a certain amount of time, it took a while. I mean, I think it took like a good like year, but there was one day that I got really upset, and I noticed my wife and our oldest daughter were drinking together and watching a movie in our room, and uh, there was glass of wine on my nightstand, and the bottle of wine was sitting out in the kitchen open. And I was like, man, this is out of control. Neither one of them are big drinkers, so it wasn't really that big of a deal, but for them. But for me, it was a big deal. And some of you guys, and you can put down in the comments if you've experienced anything like this. A lot of people don't have a problem. A lot of people in my sobriety group would say, you're overreacting. I don't even care if my spouse drinks whenever, wherever. It's their choice, whether it's in our room, in the house, at dinner, at a party, or whatever. And but then there's other people that are like, that's triggering to drink, like that triggers them to want to drink alcohol. Um, and then there's someone like me who it's just triggering not to drink, but to have these thoughts that lead to anxiety, lead to ill will, and And nobody needs that. It's not good for our mental health. It's not good for our recovery. It's not good for our relationships. So ultimately, it was something that I had to look into and figure out for myself. And I found a way through that. Eventually, she got it. We didn't have to have that conversation anymore. Um, I think a lot of time I'm 5+ years alcohol free now. And honestly, I think like maybe a couple weeks ago, I saw her drinking a glass of wine over there, but I don't think she expected me to be home. It happened that one time. It hasn't happened since. And before that, it was like a year, 2 years. It's been a long time. So that situation wasn't that big of a deal. Um, but yeah, if it repeated again, I may have to say something. I don't know, but it didn't seem to bother me like it used to. And I think that once we like time passes by, we're kind of able to form. And sometimes you don't notice this right away, but if we form other coping mechanisms, or we're able to replace those thoughts with other things, that really does help. And then eventually, like you're in a situation like that, like I was, and you're like, I feel like I'm better at handling situations like that now, and I'm not so easily triggered. And I think that is what it's like to be, a kind of obsessive compulsive. I don't have those compulsions like I did before as a drinker, even early on into my recovery. And like I said, when I notice them now, I try to replace those things with healthier things. And a lot of people do say, and I read a quote, I think it was by Jim Carrey the other day, and he said, find other things to do that aren't your phone. And that was a huge thing. Now, for me, I make tons of excuses because I use my phone to do YouTube videos. I use my phone to edit my videos. I use my phone for basically for everything on YouTube. And and then I have a Facebook group. So I'm constantly on both, but I'm more on Facebook regularly scrolling than like YouTube. I do get on YouTube every now and then, and I do scroll, and I do watch videos. I mean, I have maybe like 5 to 10 people that I watch regularly. Um, and I don't watch, all their videos or whatever, but like every now and then I'll save one and I'll watch it later. Or if I'm not doing anything, I'll just sit there and watch it for a little bit or watch the whole thing. And I don't feel that bad about that. I feel like we're allowed that, um, especially if it's downtime. But at the same time, like Facebook, you're inundated with all kinds of things. Maybe you like for me, I do follow probably pages that are not healthy for me. And I notice that. And then it's hard to let go. Once you become accustomed to seeing that and getting that dopamine hit, and then you get that rush of adrenaline kind of, and then you're like, yeah, they agree with what I think, and yeah, 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 and it feels good. And then it's like I have a conversation about it with my wife, and she'll say like, maybe you just need to get rid of that. And it's like, no, no, I don't need to get no, I don't need to get rid of that. But at the same time, as the weeks pass by, it's like, yeah, maybe I do. And that's what I love about marriage, is that we can hold each other accountable. Like when I was a single guy for most of my life until I met my wife, it's just ourselves. It was just myself relying on myself, to make these changes. And yeah, once I met her, and then especially once I got engaged to her, I was able to kind of fix a lot of the things that I wanted to be done with, um, before I got married. And I got into some of that in my last couple of videos. like debt being one of them. I wanted to pay off some debt. I reached out to my biological father, those kinds of things. I wanted to kind of, string up and put a bow tie on it and be done with it, And but drinking was not in the cards. And she was a drinker, I was a drinker, and it was just like, yeah, this is accepted, and I'm just gonna, enjoy it and keep going. I'm gonna take this drinking as far as I can take it, and I think that's what I did. And it was, I think, the pandemic. I know it was the pandemic that really opened my eyes to how much I was drinking. All the bags of returnables accumulating in my garage because we couldn't take them back was just like an eye-opening experience. Like, I'm taking out bags and there's piles of them, like 50 to 100 cans and bottles in each bag. And I'm like, man, that is a lot of alcohol, and I don't feel good. I'm tired of being reminded of that. But honestly, I think that that's what it takes. We need to remind ourselves or be reminded of the bad behaviors. If we can't do it ourselves, it helps to have someone there that can kind of hold us accountable. And maybe we don't want to hear it. Maybe that's annoying. Maybe it's frustrating. Maybe it's embarrassing. But at the same time, the biggest thing that I can say that recovery gave me in the first couple years of quitting alcohol was I was able to get my self-esteem back. I was able to get my confidence back. I was able to work on that, cultivate it, groom it, and then year 3 I was able to kind of take a step further even and work on not hanging on what other people are saying and not caring so much about what other people think. That was a huge thing, and I struggled with that for a long time, most of my life, and it was because for a lot of different reasons, but I think the main reason was because I turned to alcohol to cope with that. And then I found solace in it. And then I just, you just keep on reaching for it. And then you find yourself relying on it and getting benefit from it. And you don't need to fix those other things, especially if you're a single person and it's not affecting other people. At least you perceive it that way. Uh, for me, I mean, growing in my recovery, also growing in my faith, I always feel like, God is there and God is present, and I feel like God can help me with that. I always had God, I always had prayer, but I didn't have it to the degree that I have it now, and I thank my recovery and my being alcohol free for that. Because I wasn't able to do that while I was drinking. I thought I could. I always thought I could get better by doing all these things: praying, meditating, hiking, going to therapy, just reading, researching how to get better at this. But none of it ever worked. It was getting alcohol free, putting it down 100%, no alcohol. That really was the first step. And then the second step is whatever that is. Like, I didn't know what my second step was going to be after I was able to get through the big urges to drink. All I knew is that I wanted to be done with alcohol, and I wanted to get through those urges, and I wanted to see what life could be like without alcohol. And when I got there, it was rewarding. It was everything that I had hoped it would be. There was still some disappointment because I still would have FOMO, and I would still kind of romanticize alcohol sometimes, and I would still kind of daydream about drinking and all that. And that was about 3 months into my being alcohol free, and that still went on for quite a while. I would say into about year 3 was when I was really able to notice that I was still seeking an escape. I was still obsessing about trying to find things that would help me cope, help me feel better, help me be happier, help me feel more fulfilled. And ultimately, it was knowing that and learning that about myself that helped me get to the other side of that, even. So there's stepping stones. And every single, like, basically every single year since then has been a year of growth. And this year, I picked up reading. I probably read more books this year than I had in the previous like 10 or 15 years combined. And that's because I just wanted to, find a like better way to cope with the scrolling thing. It's annoying, it's frustrating. But anyway, that's not what this whole video is about. It's more about the finding solace in healthy things and pushing aside the things that are not good for us. And we can help each other out by doing that. And that's what this group is for. That's what this channel. That's why I started this channel. That's why I started my Facebook group. It's so we have a place we can go to share our struggles, to share our wins, to share like everything about our life and our recovery, and have a place where we can go and do that. So if you found value in this video, please like and subscribe. Hit the thanks button. Please consider being a member. I have 4 different levels of memberships. I've got videos that come out for members only, shorts for members only, and things like that. And if you need a group, if you don't want to post here and you want to post privately, you can go down to my comment section here, click on my sobriety group on Facebook. It's called Sobriety in the Storm. Click on there. There's just a few questions to answer, and then and also check out my last video, and then check out the video that I'll have coming out in a few days. So I've got videos coming out every Sunday and Wednesday, and so stay tuned, and we'll see you on the next one. Have a great sober day, everybody.